Okay, welcome to 604 Church History. Welcome to 40 Old Eastern Orthodoxy, New Orthodoxy in America and Africa. So in this session, we're going to be looking at page 99 of 114 and exploring where we've got to with that. Let's see where it brings. Starts off by saying the West knew very little about Orthodox Christians. I think that's still the truth today. I don't think we know very much about Orthodox Christians in the West at all. But perhaps that's different to your experience, but I don't think I know very much. We start off with the 1900s with 5 Orthodox congregations, but we end in 1998 with 209. So clearly a sizable growth that we've seen come over. What we see is a migration coming over, courtesy of war and of the Iron Curtain. But we also see growth, straightforward growth by those. Tom Hanks, the actor, for example, is being named here as Greek Orthodox as an example of those who are game to join that as a denomination. Perhaps they're dissatisfied with the Catholic, Protestant, Pentecostal options, and so here they are joining the Orthodox options. What we'll be certainly very grateful to them for is the hesychasm, the Jesus prayer. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Or Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Different variations. What we see, because Orthodox churches seem to have variations amongst themselves anyway, many adhering to the Chalcedonian definition, and so not connected with the Miaphysite churches, such as Egypt and Ethiopia. The reference there to Ribena and oil, ask me about that. That's really a from my 401 churches course, but I find it a very helpful way of distinguishing between Nestorianism and Cyril of Alexandria. So on to 14, we're looking at Greece, genocide and exchanges. And here we have a very painful story of the birth of Greek nationality and independence through to 1922, the Greek-Turkish War, resulting in an exchange for some 380,000 Greek Muslims were accordingly exchanged for 1.1 million Turkish Christians. And it's this exchange that then establishes Greece, if you like, as we know it. Page 100, you've got this map, which I find quite helpful, even though I do sort of know where things are. It's still good to have it laid out. Over the whole turbulent period from the outbreak of the First World War, 3.5 million Greek Orthodox, Armenian, Apostolic or Assyrian Christians were killed in the successive regimes. So there's a huge weight of blood and martyrdom in that process. We see in Istanbul the population of Orthodox Christians plummeting. 1923, 100,000, but by the year 2000, 2,000 to 3,000. I don't know what the figure is now. And there's the painful irony about how the patriarch is to be made. Must be Turkish, a male Turkish citizen. But of course, when you're reducing the number of Orthodox clergy that are still left in that country, that's squeezing that, making that increasingly difficult. You'll note the Aegean Sea in the map that you've got as a way of seeing it as a boundary between, because of this exchange of people, between a boundary between Christian and Islamic territory. And so we have this growth of Greek national identity. And what we see here, lovely word, Christianismos, this concept of Hellenistic Christianity, so that you've got the church, Orthodox and Greek national identities converging and coming together. It's a great word. So 1923, Athens begins to come forward as its own center of population, capital city, I'm trying to go for. And with that comes this Archbishop, Papadoulos, Chrysostomos, presumably being a nickname from St. John Chrysostom of the Golden Mouth, presumably. But because of him and his leadership, we see the growth of the Orthodox Church, and we see its connection to and relevance to the national identity. The liberal Greek government investing in the Orthodox Church as a way of promoting Greek nationality, and so that pushes that forward very well. And then, so this is the ups and downs. We looked at this before when we were discussing this concept of belonging and believing when we were talking about Sweden and America. And in a sense, you've got it here. 1951, 96.7% of Greeks considered themselves to be members of the Orthodox Church, but average Sunday attendance in Athens fell from 31% down to 9%. So you've got this strong sense, very strong sense of belonging. No idea how that might relate to believing, but certainly not relating much to attendance. The Holy Mountain of Athos, powerful symbol of enduring Greek identity. And there's stuff there about its background, and the role of females, an honourable exception being made for cats. Mary, the Mother of God, is sufficiently female presence for everybody else. And of course, they keep with the Julian, not the Gregorian calendar, which is why they are shortly to celebrate their Easter, and it doesn't fall with our Easter. Two people that Stanley felt worthy of a slower focus: Archimandrite Sophrony Sergei Sakharov. 1958, he establishes a monastery, Tolashund Knights, near Malden. And here we have the Jesus Prayer coming to England in a big way, and so he gets this established, and likewise Francis Cottis, he revives 6 monasteries and proceeds to go popular with his Byzantine chanting. And there's a YouTube link there. It's really lovely. I do commend it to you as music to enjoy and relax and worship with in the background. So I commend it to you. I would like to kind of know more. I mean, how do you just revive monasteries with the Jesus Prayer? And if that's, we should be maybe learning more about this Jesus Prayer, if this is what others are using to grow their church and their peace and their presence. Let's have a look at some new strands of orthodoxy in 20th century Africa. And here we see the growth of the AOC, African Orthodox Church. It starts in America, starts in New York, and it's to some extent coming out of a desire to find an expression of church that is coming out of their own grassroots and out of their not wrapped up in colonial implications and powers and history and so on, but they themselves discovering their way of being Christian, their way of being church. And so we have this AOC, starts in New York, spreads very quickly to Nova Scotia, Nicaragua, Uganda, South Africa. And so there's a bit more detail here about the South African AOC, how it then spreads to Uganda, and then from there to Kenya. Now, during this process, there's a strong desire to make this connection with Alexandria and make a proper, because you've just started a church, you've gone and called it an Orthodox church. It's not really Orthodox, it's still using Anglican liturgy. So it's not very Orthodox. Is there a way in which we can properly connect ourselves to a proper Orthodox church like the Patriarch Christophorus II of Alexandria? And can we do that? And eventually they do manage to work that out. The Orthodox Church of Kenya split, but there's a moment in which in Stanley's book, he gets very excited seeing that by the end of the 20th century, 26,000 this church in Kenya, this African Orthodox church in Kenya, has grown to. Now, I had a little bit of look trying to find a bit more about it, and I did stumble across Wikipedia. Don't use Wikipedia in your essays. But it was interesting to see a throwaway remark there about how its current membership is down to 5,000. But all the same, you've got an interesting approach here from people seeking a different sort of expression of church. We mustn't forget the Orthodox Church paid a high price for resistance to cultural ideology, especially the Soviet Union. We saw that at the very beginning when we looked at Russia and France. And we saw it just now with regard to the Greek-Turkish War of 1922. The African Orthodox adherents in Kenya discovered that the British colonial state had little patience with Christians who chose a church that combined a radical commitment to the principle of African leadership in church and state with a conservative fidelity to ancient apostolic tradition. So here we end up with a Kenyan home-based church, which ends up at the end of the 20th century anyway, regardless of quite what Wiki has gone on to say. But there's a moment in which it is one of the most vibrant forms of African Christianity. Feel free to challenge that in your essay. You've got here the fleeing from the Bolsheviks, and this is what brings the Orthodox Church. Rowan Williams, in his okay, so I did give the plug at the very beginning of the course, and it's really good. It's really good. So I've spent the last couple of days having a good solid read of it, and it's actually a slightly misleading title because you get this idea that it's all about individual and particular theologians, and it isn't. It's actually well, there is some of that, but there's also a large amount which is exploring theologies. So there's a chapter on liberation theology, on Black theology, on Asian theology, and where it looks at a broader category of stuff. And Rowan Williams has written the chapter on Orthodox theology. And he understood half of it, to be fair, because my ability to understand Rowan Williams is limited. But there he talks about the movement out of Russia and the strength that was then brought to Paris is the example that he gives. Stanley here giving us the example of Britain. We've not explored the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, so I'm sorry. But we have again come back to this idea of nationalism and how that's expressed. We saw it with regard to Russia, with regard to Greece, and, says Stanley, really with regard to Kenya. I find that very interesting. Something we might explore is this role of nationalism again as we look at Orthodoxy. That'll do for the moment. See you shortly.